I hit the water before I even understood what Lucas had done. 1 second I was leaning on the polished rail of the Hale horizon, breathing in the cold Alaskan air. The next, Madeline's perfume drifted behind me as she leaned close and whispered, "Say hi to the whales, old man, and enjoy your $5 billion funeral." Her fingers let go of my sleeve with a casual flick. Then came the shove, soft, precise, practiced, and the world tilted sideways. I saw Lucas's face above me, pale against the moonlit sky, his mouth hanging open like he wanted to call out, but couldn't decide whether to pretend to care. The ocean swallowed me before he made that choice. The last thing I saw was the deck lights shrinking into the dark as the yacht accelerated away, taking my son, my daughter-in-law, and every illusion I had about family with it. Cold slammed into my chest, shocking the breath out of me. My heart, fresh from surgery just 3 months ago, felt like it folded in on itself. Salt water rushed past my ears, muffling every sound, except the frantic thud of my pulse. I kicked upward, fighting the weight of my clothes breaking the surface just long enough to gasp before another wave crashed into me. The yacht's engines roared, fading farther, not slowing, not turning. There was no splashing, no shouts, no life ring thrown overboard. Just a shrinking shape in the glow of navigation lights disappearing into the black. I forced my body to move to stay afloat, to think. Lucas had looked right at me. There was no surprise in his eyes, only fear. Fear that I might survive. Fear that the man holding the keys to $5 billion and a global maritime empire might live long enough to expose what he and Madeline had been carefully building. Suddenly, every odd moment from the past months rearranged itself in my mind. The questions about my will. The worried comments about my memory issues, the papers they'd urged me to sign while I was recovering, the way Madeline kept filming me with her phone. None of it was innocent. None of it was love. 36 hours earlier, Lucas had called me, his voice warmer than it had been in years. "Dad, we should celebrate your recovery. A cruise up the Alaska route, just us." I'd been caught off guard. After Helen died, the distance between my son and me had grown like a crack in a ship's hull, every year a little wider, every conversation a little shorter. When Lucas invited me on the celebration cruise, I'd taken it as a sign things were finally healing. I should have known better. On board the first afternoon, Madeline had been sweetness wrapped in silk. She pressed a mimosa into my hand, told me how proud she was of my strength after the surgery, and steered every conversation back to estate planning. "It's hard to think about," she'd said, placing her hand over mine, as if comforting me. "But probate can be messy if someone suddenly declines." She let the last word hang in the air like bait. Lucas jumped in with rehearsed concern. "Dad, maybe it's time to simplify things. You've worked so hard. You shouldn't have to deal with all the complexities now." Evelyn says he stopped correcting himself too late. "Our lawyer says we should get ahead of everything." I'd frowned. "What lawyer? What complexities? I'm fine, Lucas." He glanced at Madeline. Something passed silently between them. Later that evening, while I stepped out to the upper deck to get some air, I caught Madeline filming me through the reflection in the glass door. When she noticed I'd seen her, she smiled with exaggerated innocence. Just getting the sunset. But the phone had been angled directly at me. When I confronted Lucas in the dining cabin, he had played dumb. "Dad, it's just precaution. You've seemed tired lately. Everyone forgets things sometimes." Their tone was careful, gentle, the way someone speaks to a confused elder. It made my skin crawl. Now thrashing in the freezing Pacific, the truth slammed into me harder than the waves. They had been building a narrative, a dossier, a case for incompetence. And a dead patriarch who conveniently drowned in a tragic boating accident was the final evidence they needed. I forced myself to focus. I needed to survive the next minute, then the next. My breath came in sharp, burning gulps. My limbs were going numb. But the worst part wasn't the cold. It was the realization that my son had stood there watching me drown. That the boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to swim in the backyard pool, had chosen an ocean as my grave. A faint light flickered in the distance. At first I thought it was a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion. But then I heard the low hum of an engine, steady, rugged, nothing like the Hale Horizon's polished purr. A fishing boat. I kicked harder, desperate, forcing my head above water again and again. My vision blurred, but I could make out the silhouette of a small vessel cutting across the waves. I tried to shout, but the wind tore the sound from my throat. Still the boat slowed. A beam of light swept across the water. "There, Grandpa, someone's out there." A man's voice, older, rough, seasoned by years at sea. Hands reached for me, strong and sure, and I felt myself being hauled over the side of the boat. I collapsed onto the wooden deck, coughing seawater, trembling uncontrollably. Through my blurred vision, a heavy-set man with salt and pepper hair leaned over me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "Holy hell," he muttered. "What kind of idiot cruise dumps a man in the middle of the Pacific?" I forced the words out, teeth chattering. "They pushed me. My son, his wife, they want my estate. 5 billion. The man exchanged a dark look with the younger guy beside him, likely his grandson. "Name's Victor Santos," he said. "And if what you're saying is true, Mr. Hale," I whispered. "Tom Hale." Victor's eyebrows shot up. Recognition dawned. "Well, Hale, sounds like you've got enemies close to home." I nodded weakly. "They can't know I survived. Not yet." Victor studied me for a long moment, then tightened the blanket around me. "Then let's make sure your family thinks you're dead. Because until you figure out what they've planned, going back to them is suicide." I let my eyes close, the boat rocking beneath me, exhaustion pulling me under. But before the darkness took me completely, one thought burned through the cold. If my son wanted me gone, then I would come back as a ghost he could never control. The world steadied into focus slowly, like a camera lens struggling to lock onto light. I lay wrapped in 2 thick blankets that smelled of engine oil and brine, while the fishing boat thudded over the waves toward a coastline I barely recognized. Every bone in my body still ached from the cold. My throat felt raw from swallowing seawater. But my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I remembered Lucas's voice, Madeline's whisper, the way they had stood above me like surgeons preparing for an operation, except what they meant to remove wasn't a tumor, it was me. Permanently. The irony stung. I had spent decades building Hale Maritime, teaching my son everything I knew, imagining one day he might take the helm with pride. Instead, he had boarded the yacht with forged compassion, a rehearsed smile, and a plan to send me into the ocean like unwanted cargo. I pushed myself upright as Victor Santos appeared beside me, handing me a thermos. "Sip slow," he warned. "You drink hot too fast, after cold shock you'll pass out." I obeyed, letting the heat soothe its way into my core. Victor lowered himself onto a crate across from me, studying me with the wary calculation of someone who had seen too much of the ocean's bad decisions. "You were lucky," he said. "My grandson spotted something in the water. Most nights out here we're alone." His grandson Diego poked his head from the cabin door, giving me a shy, relieved nod before returning to the wheel. I tightened the blanket around me. "They didn't plan for me to be found." Victor shrugged. "That much is obvious. You want to tell me why your own blood threw you overboard like last week's bait?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "My son wants control of my estate. $5 billion is apparently too tempting to wait for." Victor let out a low whistle. 5 billion will turn saints into devils. But pushing your own father off a yacht, that's a different level of rot. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and replayed the last 24 hours, searching for the signs I had ignored. Breakfast on the yacht had been my first red flag. Lucas had poured orange juice for me with a bright smile, but his hand trembled just enough for me to notice. Madeline had held her phone at waist level, pretending to take a photo of the sea, while the camera caught me in the corner of the frame. I remembered asking, "What are you filming?" She'd flashed her impeccable smile. "Just memories, Tom. Just memories." But I'd seen the angle. Seen how she lingered whenever I set my glass down or needed a moment to sit with my aching hip. She wasn't filming memories. She was documenting a case. A case where I looked frail, confused, declining. The dementia narrative. Later that morning, Lucas had pulled out paperwork he claimed I needed to sign for insurance. When I asked why there were pages referring to temporary guardianship, he laughed nervously, saying, "It's just legalese, Dad. You know lawyers." I remembered how he'd placed his hand on my shoulder, squeezing just slightly too hard, as though reminding me I was no longer the man who used to demand answers. The man who once commanded fleets. And then the folder that had accidentally slipped from Madeline's purse. Cognitive Decline Report. Draft. Seeing my name typed above notes about memory gaps, repeated confusion, and unsafe decision-making had chilled me more than the Alaskan sea. "I should have read the signs," I murmured. "You trusted your son," Victor said. "That's not a fault. That's humanity." I looked out at the horizon, a single strip of pink pushing through the gray. Humanity is what they counted on. When the fishing boat pulled into a small, weather-beaten dock, Victor handed me a thick coat. "We'll get you warm and somewhere safe," he said. "And then you're going to tell me everything start to finish." I followed him up the dock, the boards creaking beneath our boots. A small cabin sat at the end of the pier, lights spilling from the windows. As I stepped inside, the warmth hit me instantly. A kettle whistled on the stove. The scent of grilled fish lingered in the air. Diego rushed forward with a first aid kit. "We need to get his temperature up," he said more confidently than before. Victor chuckled. "Listen to the kid. He knows cold water better than most adults." They wrapped me in another blanket and sat me near the stove. Once the shaking in my hands subsided, Victor sat beside me. "Now talk." What exactly happened on that yacht? I told him everything. The sudden invitation, the perfect hospitality, the increasingly pointed questions about my will, the forged medical records, the staged videos. The moment on the upper deck when I'd overheard Lucas say, "We can't wait any longer. The incident needs to look natural." Then the shove. Victor listened without interrupting. When I finished, he rubbed his jaw. Sounds like a professional setup. Not just a greedy kid and his poisonous wife. "I thought so too," I said. There was someone else, a woman. Madeline let her name slip once, Evelyn. Lucas almost panicked when she did. Victor raised an eyebrow. "You know any Evelyns?" "Not personally," I said. But the way Lucas reacted, I shivered, remembering. Whoever she is, she has influence over them. Victor leaned back. "If your son's tied up with a pro, then you're dealing with more than family betrayal. You're dealing with organized crime financial predators, maybe even black market estate consultants. There's a whole industry built on cleaning out rich old men." The words hit uncomfortably hard. "You think Lucas would hire people like that?" I asked. "Looks like he already did," Victor said. "Accidents on yachts happen all the time. Too easy to fake. And as far as your family knows, Tom Hale is drifting somewhere between Alaska and the Arctic Circle." A beat of silence passed. "Which means," Victor continued, "you have an advantage. For the moment." The crackle of the fire filled the space between us. The realization struck with a weight I hadn't expected. As long as Lucas and Madeline believed I was dead, I was free. Free to investigate. Free to uncover their network. Free to reclaim my legacy. I straightened. I can't go to the police yet. If my son finds out I'm alive, he'll try again. And they'll have time to clean up everything, emails, accounts, forged documents. Victor nodded slowly. So, what's the plan? I looked down at my trembling hands, then at the flames dancing in the stove door. I need to know who Evelyn is. I need to know how deep Lucas has gone. And I need to find out what they've already set in motion. Victor gave a grim smile. Good. Because going after the living is a hell of a lot easier when they think you're dead. I hesitated. Victor, why are you helping me? You could have dropped me at a hospital, collected a reward, anything. Victor shrugged. I've got a rule. You don't leave a man to die in the ocean. And you sure as hell don't let family get away with murder. Diego stepped in from the doorway. Grandpa says some people just aren't meant to go quietly. I managed a weary smile. Then let's make sure I don't. Outside, the wind howled across the water, pulling the cold night deeper into the coastline. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, Lucas and Madeline were probably rehearsing their grief, preparing their statements for the press, and waiting for the official confirmation of my death. They had tried to erase me, but I wasn't gone. Not by a long shot. And the next time they saw me, it wouldn't be as a father. It would be as a ghost. The cabin was quiet except for the steady ticking of an old wall clock and the low hum of wind slipping through the boards. I sat at Victor's narrow table, the heat from the stove finally reaching deep into my bones. My hands had stopped trembling, but the inside of my chest hadn't. I felt like a man stitched together with cold water and adrenaline barely held in place by shock. Start from the beginning, Victor said as he poured steaming coffee into a chipped mug. Not the shove. The day before. The moments you overlooked. I took the cup, inhaling the bitter warmth. There were signs. I just didn't want to see them. Start there, he said. I drew a breath. Lucas called me the day before the cruise I began. He never calls. Not unless he needs funding or wants to vent about business. This time his voice was warm. Too warm. Victor sat across from me, arms crossed. What did he say? That he wanted to celebrate my recovery from surgery? A father-son moment. The kind we haven't had since before Helen died. The lie felt obvious now. Painfully obvious. He had known exactly which wound to press. He sounded genuine, I said. Maybe that's why I ignored everything that came after. The morning of the cruise felt far away, like a memory dipped in fog. But once I began speaking, the details sharpened each one a blade. When I arrived at the marina, Lucas hugged me. I felt his hands shake, but I thought it was excitement. Now I know better. You think it was guilt? Victor asked. Or nerves, I said. Maybe fear that I'd sensed something was wrong. What about the wife? I exhaled slowly. Madeline. Too perfect, too prepared. She had champagne waiting. She had camera angles planned. She kept guiding discussions to my health, my memory, my capability. She kept filming me. Victor leaned forward. Tell me about the filming. She pretended to take photos, I said, but she was always recording. When I stumbled because my hip was sore, she made sure the camera caught it. When I paused to think, she zoomed in on my face. When I told the same story twice, she smiled and encouraged me to rest. Building evidence, Victor murmured. Manufacturing decline. I nodded grimly. A dementia narrative. A staged incompetency timeline. The words scraped my throat raw. To them, I was already a corpse, just not yet drowned. What else? Victor asked. Midday, I continued. Lucas asked about my will, about the Hale Trust. He said probate could get complicated if something happened to me suddenly. He said, Evelyn. I stopped. I hadn't meant to say her name out loud. Evelyn, who Victor pressed. I don't know, I admitted. Madeline said the name Elena at first. Lucas corrected her. They looked terrified. That means Evelyn's the one pulling the strings. Yes, I said. I heard Lucas whisper to her on the upper deck. He thought I was asleep. He said, we can't wait any longer. The accident needs to look natural. Victor clenched his jaw. That's not a family argument. That's a contract. My grip tightened on the mug. Later, when I confronted them, they spoke to me like handlers, not family. They tried to convince me I was losing memory. They insisted I needed a guardian, Lucas. Guardianship gives him power of attorney, Victor said. POA gives access to the estate. He said it was temporary, I whispered. Just until I recovered. Victor let out a dry laugh. Temporary as in until you disappeared. I felt a surge of shame burning under my ribs. I let myself believe them. I wanted to believe Lucas. I kept thinking, he's my son. That's how predators work, Victor said quietly. They don't start with violence. They start with trust. The truth stung too deeply to deny. And then I continued slowly. After sunset, the captain disappeared. What do you mean disappeared? I went to the wheelhouse to compliment him on handling the boat. The door was locked. No lights inside. No movement. Victor's stare hardened. You know what that means. I do now, I said, but at the time I told myself maybe he was below deck. Maybe he was resting. You were alone with them. Victor's voice lowered. On a vessel miles from shore. Yes, I said. And I didn't realize it until it was too late. I drifted back to the memory, the tasting of the salt air, the sting of cold wind on my cheeks, the polished teak under my shoes. The last hour felt wrong, I said, like the world was holding its breath. Lucas kept pouring champagne. Madeline kept toasting my long life, but their eyes had already buried me. And then Victor asked softly. I met his gaze. Then they took me to the stern deck. Lucas pointed out stars. Madeline stepped behind me, and she whispered. The words still echoed in my skull like a knife dragged across glass. Say hi to the whale's old man. Victor's face darkened, and Lucas let it happen. He didn't move, I said. He didn't shout. He didn't stop her. He stood there and watched. I set the mug down with a shaking hand. I raised him. I taught him to fish, to tie his first knot, to navigate a compass. And he stood there and watched. Victor didn't speak for a moment. He didn't have to. Finally, he said, Your boy's in deep with someone dangerous. Too dangerous for a pampered heir like him to think this up alone. Evelyn, I said. Probably the architect, he agreed. The mastermind. Your son and Madeline, their clients. Pawns, people willing to trade morals for inheritance. And Evelyn, I asked. Could be a lawyer. Could be a financial consultant. Could be a criminal who knows how to wear a suit better than most CEOs. I stared into the flames. They'll think you're gone now, Victor said. Yes. And if they think you're gone, he continued, they'll start executing whatever she planned next. Frozen accounts, probate fraud, selling parts of your companies, transferring assets offshore. I looked up. They think they've won. That's your advantage, Victor said. They don't know there's a survivor, a witness, a ghost. A slow, cold anger spread through me, steady, focused, clean. Not the fury of betrayal, the clarity of purpose. They want to stage my death, I said. Fine, let them think it worked. Victor grinned. That's the spirit. I stood, wrapping the coat tighter around me. We need to find out who Evelyn is, what she's planning, who else is involved. And then Victor asked. I stared out the cabin window toward the black stretch of ocean they'd meant as my grave. Then I said quietly, I make sure the next funeral isn't mine. Victor nodded. Where do we start? We start, I said, by going back to the beginning. To the moment everything changed. To the deck of my own yacht. To Alaska, he asked. To the truth, I answered. Victor grabbed his keys. Then let's hunt them before they realize the ghost they made is coming home. And as the first light broke over the water, something inside me shifted. Lucas and Madeline had cast me into the sea thinking I would vanish. Instead, they had awakened a man with nothing left to lose and 5 billion reasons to take everything back. Victor's pickup rumbled down the narrow coastal road, its headlights carving weak tunnels through the fog. I sat in the passenger seat, bundled in borrowed clothes that still smelled faintly of fish and diesel, watching pine silhouettes flicker past like silent sentinels. The world was too still, too calm. It was a cruel contrast to the storm inside my chest. By the time we reached the small warehouse, Victor called his fix-it shop. The sky had shifted from ink to slate. A few halogen lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the cluttered space, rusted anchors, coils of rope engines in various states of disassembly. But in the corner, surprisingly spotless, was a metal workbench stacked with electronics. This is where we start, Victor said, tossing me a clean towel. If you want to stay dead, we need information before your killers make their next move. I sat heavily on an overturned crate. I thought Lucas was the one who wanted me gone. He wants the money, Victor replied. But someone else, this Evelyn, wants the control. And people like her don't just stop with one death. You were a project, a target. Your son is just a tool. I bristled at the word, tool. But it fit, and that hurt worse. While Victor rummaged through drawers for a burner phone, I replayed the previous night. The shove, the cold, the look on Lucas's face, not anger, not hatred, but something more cowardly. Fear. He'd already committed himself to the plan. And now, I needed to know how far he'd gone, how deep this conspiracy ran, and whether Evelyn Trevino had carved other victims out of their own families before coming for me. We began by recreating a timeline, every conversation, every suspicious detail from the past 6 months. Everything Lucas and Madeline had said while pretending to take care of me after my surgery. Victor scribbled notes on a large piece of butcher paper. So let's list the pressure points, he said. Moments where they might have planted the seeds. The new Dr. Madeline recommended, I said quietly. He kept asking if I was forgetting things. Victor wrote doctor is possible accomplice, and the emails from my financial advisor suddenly stopped. I continued. He used to update me weekly. Then nothing. Victor nodded. If Evelyn's an estate predator, she'll target the financial channels too. Makes it easier to move assets. The thought made my stomach twist. My life's work, my company, my ships, my legacy was no longer mine, at least on paper. They mentioned probate, I said, repeatedly. They said my will was outdated for today's standards. Victor's eyes narrowed. Modern probate fraud requires 2 things: the narrative of decline and control of the victim's paperwork. They were building the first. They were reaching for the second. He wasn't wrong. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, and then there was the phone call. What phone call? The one Madeline answered when she thought I couldn't hear. She said, Phase 1 is complete. Victor froze. Phase 1, yes. That means they're following a playbook. Organized crime loves phases. Phase 1 is usually evaluation and conditioning. Phase 2 is incapacitation. Phase 3 is removal. Removal. I repeated, swallowing. Death, Victor said bluntly. The room felt colder. We sat in silence for a moment until Victor clapped his hands sharply. All right. We hunt. We gather intel. Then we go after your son and his puppet master. My son, I echoed softly. I keep trying to see the boy he used to be. And that's exactly why they almost won, Victor said. You keep looking at him like family. He's looking at you like a $5 billion payout. The truth stung, but I didn't deny it. We divided the plan into 3 prongs. First, track the secondary players, doctors, financial advisors, lawyers. Second, identify Evelyn and her role in the operation. Third, determine whether Lucas and Madeline were acting alone or part of something larger. Victor handed me the burner phone. We're going to call your people. Quietly. Anyone you trust, I thought for a long moment. Only one name surfaced: Richard Carlton, an old friend who ran the IT division of Hale Maritime for years before retiring. He's not involved, I said. And he hates corporate lawyers. Perfect. Victor dialed using a voice-modifying app and handed me the phone. Richard. It's Tom, I whispered. There was a long pause on the line. Tom. That can't be. The news said I know. Keep your voice down. I need information. He exhaled shakily. What on earth happened? Later, I said. Right now, I need access logs. Has anyone tried to change permissions on the Hale Trust servers? Not tried, Richard said grimly. Succeeded. Someone with administrative clearance rewrote your authority levels. It happened 2 days ago. The new documents list you as cognitively impaired. It felt like being shoved into the ocean all over again. Who signed the request? I asked. A woman named Trevino. Evelyn Trevino. I met Victor's eyes. There she was. Richard continued. She filed an affidavit claiming to represent your estate in matters of mental deterioration. Your son co-signed. Mental deterioration. They had made me legally incompetent on paper. Richard, I said, steadying myself, I need you to rebuild everything. Logs, emails, alterations. Make copies. Hide them. No one else can know. Silence. Then I'll do it. When I hung up, Victor lit a cigarette. Well, that confirms it. Evelyn's not just a consultant, she's a puppet master. And your son? He handed her the strings. I exhaled slowly. We need to know what she's built, who else she's planning to kill. Then we identify her, Victor said. And we use the devil's favorite weapon. What weapon? Fear. People like her think they're untouchable. You show them a shadow where a corpse should be, and they unravel. He reached into a metal drawer and pulled out a long, flat case. Inside was a small drone, sleek, silent military grade. You're kidding, I said. Nope. Coast Guard surplus. I upgraded the camera myself. He placed it on the table and fired up his laptop. We're going to send this baby to your yacht's tracking signal. If Evelyn's crew has boarded it, or if Lucas used it again, we'll see. My pulse thudded against my ribs. Do it! The drone lifted with a faint whisper, exiting through the open skylight. Victor switched to a split-screen view GPS on one side, camera feed on the other. Closing in on the yacht, he muttered. Give it a second. The screen flickered, then sharpened, and what I saw made my blood run colder than the Alaskan swell. Lucas was back on the Hale horizon. He wasn't alone. A woman in a burgundy coat stood beside him, hands clasped behind her back, posture flawless. The drone zoomed closer. Her face was sharp, elegant, and utterly devoid of warmth. Evelyn Trevino, Victor said softly. I felt the breath leave my lungs. She was younger than I expected. Pretty, composed, deadly. Lucas paced nervously, while Evelyn surveyed the deck with the detached calm of someone inspecting property. not people. And then she spoke. Victor boosted the audio. "We proceed with Phase 2 tonight," she said. "The documents are filed. The press statement is prepared. By Monday morning, Thomas Hale will be declared permanently incompetent. Then, deceased." I gripped the table until my knuckles went white. They weren't just trying to kill me physically. They were killing me legally, erasing me, replacing me. "Phase 2 begins," Evelyn said. "Make sure nothing remains that can contradict the narrative." Lucas swallowed. "What about everything?" Evelyn interrupted. "Every loose end must be tied." And she smiled, a slow, practiced smile of someone who had done this many times before. Victor shut the laptop, jaw clenched. She's killed before. Many times. I felt something inside me lock into place. A resolve so hard it felt carved from iron. "She picked the wrong family," I said. Victor smirked. "Then let's make her regret it." Outside, the morning light spilled across the horizon, the same horizon they'd meant as my grave. But I was still here, not broken, not drowned, alive. And for the first time since the shove, I felt it. I wasn't the hunted anymore. I was the storm coming back toward them. Victor's warehouse felt smaller when the sun went down, as if the walls leaned inward with every passing hour. The air smelled of oil metal and old secrets fitting considering what we were about to attempt. I stood near the workbench, staring at the drone footage frozen on Victor's laptop. Evelyn on the deck of my yacht, hands folded neatly. Lucas beside her like a frightened child waiting for permission to breathe. I had survived the ocean. I had survived betrayal. But tonight, I needed to do something far more dangerous. Go back to my old life without being seen. "We leave in 10 minutes, Victor said, tightening a strap on a small tactical bag. "The farther we get from here, the better." I nodded, though my stomach churned. "And you're sure you want to do this with me?" He snorted. "You kidding? This is the most fun I've had in years." Diego stood by the door with an extra jacket for me. "Grandpa says to stay quiet, stay low, and let him talk when needed." "He's not wrong," Victor muttered. "We're hunting information tonight, not starting a war yet." The plan was simple in theory. Slip into my cabin on the Hale horizon, while it was docked for maintenance, retrieve anything Evelyn hadn't destroyed or stolen, and leave without leaving a footprint. The captain's absence the night I was pushed told me the ship wasn't under normal protocol anymore. Someone likely paid off or threatened was controlling it. That someone might still be there. We drove toward the marina with our lights off for the last half mile. The night smelled like salt and diesel. The water rocked gently against the docks. Everything looked peaceful. But there was nothing peaceful about the Hale horizon. The yacht sat too still, too silent, as if holding its breath. Its lights were low. A shadow moved on the top deck, large, broad-shouldered. "Not Lucas," Victor whispered. "Probably hired muscle." I swallowed hard. Evelyn wouldn't leave it unguarded. "Good," Victor said. "Means whatever they want hidden is still aboard." He killed the engine and motioned for me to follow. We stuck to the shadows, moving between stacks of crates. The metal groaned under my feet as I crawled onto a secondary dock used for technicians. Victor signaled for me to stay low as he clipped a device onto the yacht's side, something like a wireless disruptor. "Camera loop," he whispered. "We've got 90 seconds each time I trigger it. Move when I say move, and stop when I say stop." We waited until the guard on the upper deck turned his head toward the water. "Move!" Victor hissed. We sprinted silent but fast across the ramp and ducked behind the storage lockers near the stern. My heart hammered, but adrenaline sharpened everything. The smell of salt. The vibrations of the yacht moving with the tide. The faint hum of generators below deck. "This way," Victor mouthed. My cabin door was still sealed, but the lock had been tampered with. Scratched pride. Someone tried to get inside, or already had. Victor produced a slim metal tool and unlocked the door in under 4 seconds. Inside, my cabin felt violated. Drawers were pulled out, clothes thrown aside, papers missing. The bookshelf knocked over. They had searched everything, but not well enough. Behind a loose panel beneath the desk, the one only Helen and I knew about, there was a slim steel box, still untouched. I eased it out slowly, my hands trembling. "Documents," Victor whispered. "No," I said softly. "Something better." Inside the box were black leather-bound journals, records I had kept for decades. Notes on business deals, partnerships, conflicts, acquisitions, including the detailed contract negotiations Evelyn had attempted 12 years ago when she first tried to embed herself into my company. "This proves she targeted me years ago," I said. "She didn't just stumble onto my family." Victor skimmed a page, eyes narrowing. "She's been circling you a long time." And these, I said, pulling out a small red notebook, contained the original Hale Trust codicils. The real ones. Eva, Madeline, and Lucas submitted forged ones. But these are the documents I updated myself. "Then we need them out of here," Victor said. "Fast." Footsteps sounded on the deck overhead. We froze. A door slammed. Someone barked to another guard. "Sweep below deck. Orders from Trevino. Check every room." Victor clenched his jaw. "We're out of time." He pointed toward the small maintenance corridor behind the cabin, an old route used by plumbers when the yacht was first built. It opened into the engine compartment. We slipped inside just as 2 guards entered my cabin. I held my breath. "Place is clear," one muttered. "Boss wants every inch checked," the other said. "She thinks someone's been poking around." My pulse thundered. They were 1 door away. But then Victor nudged me, pointing ahead. In the dim corridor, the walls vibrated with the steady hum of the engines. The metal was warm beneath my hands. "This way," Victor whispered. The engine bay was empty, thank God. But the main hatch to the deck was bolted shut from the outside. No escape upward. "Lower hatch," Victor mouthed, pointing to the small access grate near the floor. "Leads to the bilge walkway." I stared. That path is barely wide enough for a kid. "You swim out the bottom or you let them find you," Victor whispered harshly. "Choose." We crouched and slid into the grate, 1 limb at a time. Cold metal scraped my back. Salt water sloshed underneath, reflecting thin strips of light from the walkway. As we crawled forward, Victor whispered, "They're scared." "That's good. Scared people make mistakes." "I'm not scared," I muttered, more to myself than him. "I'm angry. Tremendous. Use it later. Crawl now." We reached the end of the walkway, a ladder leading to a side maintenance door inches above the waterline. But when Victor pushed it, it didn't budge. Rust. He braced his shoulder and pushed harder. Still nothing. Then voices from the engine room above. "They're down there. Check the bilge hatch." Victor's eyes flashed with urgency. "Kick it." "What?" "Kick it." With both heels, I drove my weight into the door. It groaned. Sea spray burst through the cracks. Again, Victor hissed. I kicked harder. The metal shrieked and finally swung open. Cold night air blasted in. "Go." Victor shoved me through and we splashed into the frigid marina water. We surfaced quietly, clinging to the side of a neighboring fishing boat, until 2 guards burst onto the lower deck of the yacht, shining flashlights across the water. But they didn't look down. They didn't see us clinging inches below their line of sight. When they finally stepped back into the yacht, Victor whispered, We swam slow, controlled strokes toward the far pier. By the time we pulled ourselves out near a row of empty kayaks, My muscles burned with cold. But the steel box was still in my hands. We collapsed behind stacks of rope coils until our breathing steadied. That Victor wheezed was too damn close. I opened the steel box again. The journals glowed under the dim pier lights. "We have evidence," I whispered. "Real evidence. Of planning, of forgery, of her." And Lucas Victor asked gently, "My son is in deeper than I feared," I said, my voice tightening. "But Evelyn, she's the one who built the trap." "And now you've got the only keys to dismantle it," Victor said. I stared at the steel box, feeling the weight of my past and future inside it. "They tried to erase me," I said softly. "So I'm going to erase their plan instead." Victor grinned, teeth flashing. "Well then, Mr. Hale, ready to go hunting for ghosts?" A slow, deliberate calm settled over me. "No," I said, "not ghosts." I stood gripping the steel box like a promise. Truth. The rain began sometime before dawn, a soft tapping on the roof of Victor's truck as we drove inland toward the safe house. It wasn't really a house, more like an abandoned ranger cabin deep in the woods, but it was far from the marina, far from my yacht, far from the reach of Evelyn Trevino's watchful eyes. My clothes were still damp from our escape, and my muscles ached from cold and fear. But I kept the steel box clutched against my chest like a lifeline. Inside were the only pieces of my life Evelyn hadn't managed to steal or corrupt. My journals, my trust codicils, names, dates, history, evidence. Evidence that would ruin her if I survived long enough to use it. Victor slowed the truck as we approached the cabin. "You're awfully quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," I answered. "About your son." "About all of it," I said. "Lucas, Madeline, Evelyn. How long they've been planning this. How someone as powerful as Evelyn even found her way into my family's life." Victor parked and killed the engine. Good. Thinking keeps you alive. Emotion gets you dead. But emotion was exactly what I felt as I stepped inside the cabin. Anger, betrayal, resolve. We set the steel box on the wooden table in the center of the cabin. Victor moved around the room, checking the windows, making sure no sensors or tracking devices had been left by previous visitors. When he was satisfied, he nodded at me. "Open it." I lifted the lid, and the journals seemed to glow under the dim lantern light. I flipped through the first 1 pages and pages of notes detailing business transitions, partnerships, restructuring deals. Then the next trust updates beneficiary listings clauses I'd written personally to protect Helen and Lucas. Then a page that stopped me cold. A contract proposal, one I had rejected 12 years earlier. Evelyn Trevino's name appeared at the top in bold, precise lettering. I knew this handwriting, I whispered. I knew her cadence even back then. Victor leaned over my shoulder. "Read." I scanned the document. Proposal restructuring Hale Family Holdings. Objective streamline probate contingencies. Strategy early transfer of assets to designated successors. Notes. Overcome resistance from primary holder. Thomas Hale. "She wanted to restructure my estate," I said slowly. "To make it easier for Lucas to inherit early." "You rejected her?" Victor asked. "Of course I did," I said. Helen didn't trust her. I didn't either. But I didn't imagine she'd resurface a decade later with a death plan. Victor smirked. "Hell hath no fury like a probate lawyer scorned." I turned another page and felt my stomach sink. Handwritten notes were scribbled in the margins, clearly Evelyn's. Target resists control. Son malleable. Future opportunity likely after spouse passes. I read the last line twice. She targeted me after Helen died. Predators smell grief, Victor said. And power and money. I closed the journal and inhaled sharply. There's more. She mentioned phases. They're following a blueprint. Victor pulled up a chair. Then let's find the blueprint. We spread the journals across the table. I pointed to the most recent entries, my notes about the surgery, about Lucas insisting on handling paperwork, about Madeline's sudden obsession with trust structures. They started phase 1 by creating a narrative, I said, painting me as confused, forgetful. Victor nodded. Conditioning the environment, collecting evidence, or staging it. Phase 2. I continued, was pushing the guardianship papers. And phase 3, Victor's voice lowered. Killing you. I swallowed. Yes. He tapped the old journal. Evelyn's been doing this a long time. She doesn't just kill someone and move on. She builds a legal cage first. A story. A death that feels inevitable, even righteous. She weaponizes the law, I said bitterly. And she weaponized your son. A sharp pain tore through my chest, not physical, but worse. Lucas isn't innocent. He made choices. He did, Victor said. But a smart manipulator knows how to push weak minds. And your son, well, he didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Weak, hungry, entitled. The kind of heir who could be bent until he snapped. I sank into a chair. What happens next? Before they know I'm alive, what will Evelyn do? Victor started pacing. If she's following a pattern, she'll be eliminating any loose ends. Anyone who might contradict the official story. Medical staff, witnesses, anyone who saw you on the yacht before the shove. Anyone who can prove you weren't cognitively impaired. My doctor, I murmured. The new one, Madeline recommended. Victor froze. You think he's involved? I think he signed false evaluations, I said. That makes him a liability. Evelyn doesn't like liabilities. Victor cracked his knuckles. Then, he's either already dead or about to be. I pushed myself to my feet. We need to talk to him, before she does. Slow down, Victor warned. You can't charge into San Diego General shouting about murder. You're supposed to be dead, so we don't charge in, I said. We slip in. Like ghosts. Victor grinned. Now you're speaking my language. We packed lightly, just essentials. The rain had grown heavier, drumming on the metal roof like an urgent warning. Before we left, I opened one more journal. One dated the year Helen died. Inside was a photo of the three of us, Helen in the center. Lucas with a goofy smile and me with my arm around them both. We were on a beach in Maui. The sun was bright. The world felt whole. For a moment I let myself grieve. Not Helen, not my lost legacy, but the illusion that my son had ever loved me more than the inheritance I represented. I tucked the photo back into the journal. It's time, Victor said from the doorway. We drove through the winding roads toward the city. Half an hour later, San Diego's skyline rose through the rain like spears of light stabbing the clouds. Victor pointed to the hospital entrance. Doctor's office is third floor east wing. Night shift, lower security. Perfect. We slipped inside through a side door used by staff returning from smoke breaks. The hallways were quiet, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as we approached the office labeled Dr. Mason Hargrove, Geriatric Cognitive Specialist. I tried the handle, unlocked. Inside papers were scattered across the desk. The computer screen glowed with an open file. My file. At the top was written, Thomas Hale. Cognitive decline report. Status confirmed. Severe deterioration recommendation. Guardianship transfer. My jaw tightened as I scrolled through the report. Every symptom was fabricated. Confusion episodes, memory lapses, unstable gait, emotional unpredictability. All lies, all planted, all signed. By Dr. Hargrove. But the last page made my blood freeze. A scheduled appointment, Meeting with E. Trevino, 3:15 a.m. Objective finalization, Phase 3. Victor whispered, "She's coming tonight." I turned slowly. A figure stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, pale, trembling. Dr. Hargrove. He stared at us with wide, terrified eyes. "I was forced," he whispered. "You have no idea what she's capable of." He stepped back, voice cracking. "She told me to certify you as incompetent. She said you wouldn't survive long enough to fight it." I stepped closer. "Why did you sign it?" He swallowed. "Because if I didn't, she said she'd make my death look like an accident too." My stomach clenched. "She's killed before, hasn't she?" His silence was answer enough. "We need everything you have," Victor said sharply. "Emails, calls, contracts, anything linking you to her." Dr. Hargrove shook his head. "You don't understand. She's coming here, tonight. She wants me gone. She said I know too much." He looked at me with raw panic. "She thinks you're dead. If she finds out you're not?" He stopped, because footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow, measured, familiar. Victor stiffened. "Hale, we need to go. Now." I grabbed Dr. Hargrove's trembling wrist. "Come with us." He shook his head violently. "No. If she sees I'm missing a click." The outer hallway lights shut off, plunging half the corridor into darkness. Victor swore under his breath. "She's here," he whispered. Dr. Hargrove choked out a single phrase. "You don't fight Evelyn Trevino." But I did. I pulled Victor toward the emergency stairwell. "We're not fighting her," I said. "We're living long enough to end her." We slipped into the stairwell just as a shadow fell across the office doorway. Evelyn had arrived. And she wasn't alone. Victor slammed the stairwell door behind us, and for a moment the dim concrete shaft swallowed all other sound. My pulse hammered in my ears, my breath fogged in the cold stairwell air. Above us, faint shadows danced under the gap of the door, Evelyn's people moving through the hallway like wolves tracking the scent of a wounded animal. Victor gripped my shoulder. "We move. 3rd floor down to the loading dock. We don't stop." Dr. Hargrove's words echoed in my mind. "You don't fight Evelyn Trevino." But I shoved the fear down and followed Victor. My legs trembled as we descended the stairs, but adrenaline kept me upright. By the time we pushed out into the back lot, rain hammered the asphalt in sheets. Victor scanned the empty parking spaces. "Get in the truck," he said. "We're heading to someone who owes me a favor." We peeled onto the highway, tires hissing through water. Only when the glowing hospital sign vanished behind us did I allow myself to exhale. Victor stayed silent until we reached a narrow turnoff leading to a row of homes perched along a cliff overlooking the bay. At the end of the street stood a 2-story house with faded teal shutters and an American flag whipped sideways by the wind. "That's our guy," Victor said. "Grant Tully, private investigator." I blinked. Why would a PI know anything about Evelyn? Victor killed the engine and faced me. Because Grant used to be a detective on a financial crimes task force. He quit after a case went sideways, one involving probate fraud. Guess who his primary suspect was? My jaw tightened. "Evelyn." "Right," Victor said. "He's been tracking her ever since." The front door opened before we even knocked. Grant Tully stood there in pajama pants and a flannel shirt, hair gray at the edges, eyes sharp as if he hadn't slept in months. "You brought him," Grant said, recognition flickering across his face. "Good. Come in. We don't have much time." We followed him inside. His living room looked like a crime lab, walls covered in pinned documents, maps with colored strings, photographs of victims whose names were printed underneath: Walden Prescott, Nguyen Barker. Elderly faces, smiling faces, unaware faces. Faces dead now. Grant gestured toward the wall. Trevino's work. Cold dread slid down my spine. How long has she been doing this? Grant rubbed his temples. 7 years officially. Longer unofficially. She calls it transition planning, helping families access inheritance early. Except she always makes sure the elderly relative has a conveniently timed decline. Then an accident. Then an expedited probate. My stomach twisted. She's orchestrated at least 20 suspicious deaths, Grant continued. All wealthy, all with greedy families, all with forged medical reports and altered wills. I looked at Victor. That sounds exactly like my situation. Grant nodded. Because you weren't the exception, Mr. Hale. You were her biggest jackpot. He pulled a stack of files from his desk and slapped them down. North Star Transition Group, he said. Her shadow firm. On the surface, it's a network of estate lawyers. In reality, a machine built to legally murder the elderly. I forced myself to breathe. Tell me everything. Grant tapped the files. North Star's structure is divided into 3 parts: target identification, estate manipulation, and incident resolution. Incident resolution, Victor muttered. Code for killing. Grant nodded grimly. Evelyn never touches the victims herself. Too clean, too smart. She uses subcontractors, doctors who alter evaluations, lawyers who quietly replace wills with forged ones, financial advisors who redirect funds offshore, and cleaners who handle the accidents. I closed my eyes, remembering the missing captain on my yacht. And she recruits families. Families eager for money, Grant said. That's how she found your son. I sank onto the couch, heat rising to my face. Lucas wouldn't seek her out. He didn't? Grant said. She sought him. I tracked her digital whereabouts. She attended a conference in Seattle 2 years ago. Guess who was guest speaking about Hale Maritime's future? My throat tightened. Lucas. She introduced herself after the event. Offered him inheritance risk consultation. Grant paused. He met with her again 6 months later. That's when she started building your file. I looked at the montage on the wall, photos, timelines, death certificates. She killed those people, I whispered. Grant shook his head. She orchestrated their deaths. That's harder to prosecute. But with your testimony, and if we find the baby, I sat upright. The baby, Grant arched an eyebrow. You don't know? No, I said slowly. What baby? Grant grabbed a file and spread its contents across the table. Case 47. Evelyn used a black market surrogacy ring to supply heirs when families don't have children. Easier to claim inheritance when there's a grandchild to receive the fortune after the elder dies. My mouth went dry. She gave Lucas a baby. Grant nodded. Or sold him one. The mother disappeared under suspicious circumstances. I felt sick. This goes beyond money, beyond greed. It always does, Grant said quietly. People like Evelyn treat human lives like chess pieces. He pointed toward the wall again. But she makes mistakes when she's confident. And she's too confident right now. She thinks you're dead. That gives you the advantage. I leaned forward. We need to expose her. Eventually, Grant said. But not yet. First, we destabilize her network, find the witnesses she's planning to eliminate, trace her money, and learn everything about Project Hale. Grant handed me another file. The cover was stamped with a simple label, Phase 3, Final Resolution. I opened it. Inside were documents outlining my entire assassination, my medical decline, my supposed dementia, the guardianship papers offshore, account transfers, the fake will, even the obituary draft. All waiting to be used. A chill spread through me. She planned every detail. Grant nodded. And she's moving to the next step tonight. I closed the file and stared at the rain streaking the window. She's going to kill again, I said. Unless we stop her. Grant and Victor exchanged a look, then Victor rested a firm hand on my shoulder. You survived the ocean, he said. Now you survive this. Grant's voice dropped to a low, resolute growl. It's time to hunt the woman who hunts families. I tightened my grip on the journals on the steel box on everything they had tried to erase. I'm done running, I said. Victor smiled grimly. Good. Because next we're turning you into a ghost. And ghosts, Grant added, terrify people like Evelyn. I stood feeling the burn of purpose ignite in my chest. She took my legacy. She took my son. She took my life. Victor opened the door, rain blowing in behind him. Then, let's take everything back. I stepped into the storm ready, not as the man they tried to kill, but as the shadow returning to collect every debt they owed. Rain hammered the windshield as Victor's truck carved through the dark highway, wipers lashing back and forth like frantic metronomes. I sat in the back seat with the steel box on my lap, Elena beside me, pale and anxious, twisting the strap of her bag in trembling fingers. Grant drove ahead of us in a nondescript sedan, leading the way toward a quiet stretch of San Diego, a cluster of apartment blocks where the woman who might hold the key to everything was hiding. Elena broke the silence first. You're sure she's alive? Her voice was small, hopeful, terrified. Grant's voice crackled through the walkie, as alive as someone Evelyn wants erased can be. Maria Campos checked into San Diego Children's Hospital 3 weeks ago, gave birth. The baby disappeared. She disappeared soon after. He paused. But someone helped her run. Someone who wasn't part of North Star. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. Maria wasn't supposed to be involved in any of this. She thought she was helping a couple that couldn't conceive. She thought she'd get a fair adoption. Instead, she had been drugged, stripped of her child, and scheduled for disposal. My jaw clenched. If she's still out there, she's running scared, hiding, alone. And she thinks her baby is dead. Victor glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Tonight we fix that. We pulled up behind Grant's car near a run-down building with flickering hallway lights. Grant stood waiting under the awning, rain dripping from his hair. This is the last place Maria was seen, he said. Another tenant reported a young woman crying, rambling in Spanish, asking if anyone had taken her child. She fled before police arrived. She thought the police were part of it, Elena said softly. And she's not wrong. We climbed up to the second floor. The hallway smelled of mold and cheap disinfectant. Grant pointed to an old metal door with peeling blue paint. She stayed here. Room 2B. The room was empty but not untouched. A damp blanket lay balled in the corner. A plastic hospital bracelet lay on the floor. And on the wall, scratched in hurried strokes, was a single word. Roberto. Elena covered her mouth with a trembling hand. She named him. Not the name Evelyn planned, not the forged birth certificate name. The real one. A child stolen, a mother silenced, a legacy exploited. I bent down and picked up the bracelet. Campos Maria DOB 0224. Status maternity. Discharge pending transfer. Transfer to where I asked. Grant's expression hardened. Whitmore Reproductive Services. Private. Illegal. Trevino has ties there. My blood boiled. She's not just killing old people, she's trafficking newborns. And manufacturing heirs, Grant added. Heirs she can control. Infants placed with greedy families who want the inheritance without the senior in the way. I felt physically ill. She used my son. She uses everyone, Grant said. But we're going to find the one she couldn't kill yet. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and all of us froze. A neighbor, half asleep, shuffled past us with a grocery bag. He glanced at us suspiciously. "You looking for the girl?" he muttered. My heartbeat spiked. "Maria Campos," he nodded. She was bleeding, crying, asking about a baby. I tried to help her, but when the black car came down the street the second night, he swallowed. She ran toward the alley behind the laundromat. "Haven't seen her since?" "A black car," Victor said sharply. "Yeah," the man said. "Tinted windows, no plates. A cleaner vehicle. Evelyn's people were hunting her too. Grant didn't waste time. Split up. Check every alley and business around here. She's close, I can feel it." We moved fast. Rain soaked through my clothes, but I barely noticed. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every passing car made my pulse spike. We searched 2 alleys, then 3, then a side street with a flickering street lamp. Nothing. Until Elena screamed. We sprinted toward the sound and found her kneeling behind a dumpster. A woman lay curled on the ground, soaked and shivering, her long dark hair plastered to her face. Her eyes lifted to mine, wide and glassy. "Roberto?" she whispered, voice barely audible. "Por favor? Mi bebé." I knelt beside her. "Maria, my name is Tom. We're here to help you." She recoiled. No. They took him. They said he died, but I heard them. I heard them on the phone. He's alive." Her words tumbled out like broken glass. "They told me to sign papers. They said it was adoption. But they drugged me. They took my son. And they said I was unstable. That I imagined him." She began to sob uncontrollably. I took her shaking hands in mine. "Your son is alive. I swear to you. They took him from you, but he is alive." Her breath hitched. "Alive." "Yes," I said, "and I'm going to bring him back to you." Maria collapsed into my arms, crying with relief and terror. But our moment was cut short. A car engine revved at the end of the alley. Headlights flared. A black SUV. Victor cursed under his breath. Move! Grant pulled his gun with a practiced motion, placing himself between us and the vehicle. The passenger door opened, and a man in a black jacket stepped out, hand reaching into his coat. "Cleaner!" Victor barked. We ducked as a shot rang out. Metal sparked against the dumpster. Grant fired back, shattering the SUV's side mirror. The shooter dove behind the engine block for cover. "Tom, get her out of here!" Victor shouted. I heaved Maria to her feet. She stumbled dizzy, but I held her steady as we rushed toward the opposite end of the alley. Elena ran beside us, trying to shield Maria with her own body. Another shot, another spark. Rain mixed with gunpowder in the air. Grant yelled, "Victor, they're calling in backup. We gotta go now!" We rounded a corner just as Victor fired 2 warning shots to keep the cleaner pinned behind the SUV. We sprinted toward the truck. Grant shoved open the passenger door, and I helped Maria inside. "Go!" I shouted. Victor floored the accelerator. Tires screamed. The truck fishtailed onto the main road and roared forward as the SUV peeled out behind us. Rain blurred the world into streaks of gray and red. Maria clutched my sleeve with desperate strength. "My son, mi hijo. Don't let them take him." I looked her in the eyes, dark, terrified, filled with a mother's fight. "I won't," I said. "Trevino took my life. She won't take yours." Grant checked the mirror. They're following, but they won't risk a shootout on a highway. "Where do we go?" Victor said. "Somewhere safe," Grant replied. "Somewhere we can finally show Maria the truth." But the truth wasn't the documents, or the forged birth certificates, or the videos Evelyn used to build her empire of death. The truth was the baby. Baby 47, Roberto, her son. And if Evelyn got him first, everything would be lost. Maria's voice trembled. "Can I see him? Is he okay?" I squeezed her hand. "You will see him, and he is safer now than he has ever been." But I didn't add the rest, because safety had an expiration date, and Evelyn Trevino was running out of patience. But so was I. Tonight we had found Maria. Tomorrow we would take back her child, and then we would bring North Star crashing down. The safe house Victor chose for Maria was a run-down bungalow hidden behind an abandoned citrus grove, the kind of place no one would look at twice. The moment we carried her through the door, she clung to Elena like a child, trembling violently, whispering the same thing over and over. "Mi bebé, mi Roberto, por favor." Her desperation was a living thing in the room, crawling up the walls, choking the air. I had seen fear before men facing bankruptcy sailors caught in storms, even Lucas as a child during his nightmares. But nothing compared to a mother robbed of her child and told she imagined him. Elena stroked Maria's hair gently. "You're safe now. You're safe. We're going to help you." But safety was relative and temporary. Grant shut the curtains tight and checked his phone. "Trevino's team will figure out Maria escaped the alley in minutes. Maybe sooner. Victor locked the deadbolt, and when they do, she'll send more cleaners. Not amateurs this time." My jaw tightened. "Then, we need to move before they do." Grant nodded. "Agreed. Phase 2 of our plan starts now, restoring what Trevino erased." I set the steel box on the rickety dining table. Papers spilled out, trust documents, journals, original signatures. Proof I was alive, sane, competent. Proof Evelyn Trevino wanted erased. But proof alone wouldn't topple North Star. Not while she controlled the narrative. Not while she possessed the one thing that could be used to cement her lie. The baby. Maria lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale lips, cracked eyes swollen from tears. "You said he is alive?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You swear?" I crouched in front of her. "Maria, listen to me. Your son was placed with a family. They forged his papers. They renamed him. But he is alive." A strangled sound left her throat, a sob, a prayer, a plea. "Donde está?" Where I exchanged a glance with Grant. His expression hardened. "He's with the Hale family," he said. Maria blinked. "The rich family, the one from the hospital, the woman, the blonde one. She came to my room. She said I must forget him." Her hands curled into fists, nails digging into her palms, hard enough to draw blood. "She said he died. She said I was confused." "That's what they do," Elena said softly. "They break people's reality." Maria shook her head violently. "No more. I want my son." And with that, the fear melted away, replaced by something stronger. Something that made my chest tighten. Determination. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mother ready to fight. Grant cleared his throat. "We're getting him back, Maria. But we need to do it smart. Trevino has cops, doctors, lawyers, everyone on her side." Maria stared at him. "So do I," she whispered, gripping my hand. "Él me salvó. He saved me." Something in my chest twisted sharply. I hadn't saved her, not yet. But I would. We pulled out a map and spread it across the table. Victor pointed to the red-marked location, my mansion. Or rather, the place that used to be mine. That's where they're keeping the baby. We saw the guard rotations when we were there last. 3 on the property, 2 inside plus cameras. Grant frowned. "And Trevino will have added more after your escape." I studied the map. "Then we need a distraction." "Something loud," Victor said. "Something fast." Something that forces them to look outward, Elena added, while we go inward. Maria cleared her throat. I know something. We all turned to her. When I escaped the hospital, she said I heard a name. A woman. They said she was coming to check me. Who? Grant asked. Maria closed her eyes, searching memory through trauma. Rosen, she whispered finally. Dr. Rosen. She was in charge of the evaluations, the papers. They said she signed mine. Grant's eyebrows shot up. Dr. Liana Rosen is one of Trevino's top medical forgers. If she's involved, she'll have copies. Digital records, backups. And leverage, Victor said. Blackmail, insurance policies. A slow realization dawned on me. If Dr. Rosen is part of North Star, I said, then she knows where Trevino hides information that could destroy her. Grant nodded. We find Rosen. We find Trevino's kill file. The kill file. The rumored archive of documents Trevino kept on every murder she orchestrated, insurance to control her clients, protection from law enforcement leverage if someone tried to flip. A file that would burn her entire empire down. I straightened. Where do we find her? Grant didn't hesitate. Whitmore Reproductive Services. Maria recoiled as if struck. That place is hell. But it's where her paper trail begins, Grant said. Birth, transfer, death certificates, medical reports, and probably data on the baby. El bebé, mi hijo, Maria whispered. I squeezed her hand. We're not leaving without him. Victor smirked. Good, because I already have a plan. He unfolded a blueprint of the Whitmore facility, large, modern, polished, and rotten at the core. We enter here, Victor said, pointing to a side entrance. Shift change happens at 2 a.m. Less security. Grant, you take the servers. Hale and I will find Rosen. And me? Maria asked, lifting her chin. I opened my mouth to say, stay, but Elena beat me to it. You're coming with me, Elena said, her voice strong for the first time that night. We're getting the baby's records, the adoption papers, everything with your name on it. Maria nodded once, sharp, fierce. A mother ready for war. Grant checked his gun, his jaw tightening. If Trevino suspects you're alive, she'll assume you'll go after the child next. She'll move fast. I met his gaze. Then we moved faster. The storm outside intensified, wind howling against the thin walls, rattling the window frames like an omen. Maria touched her stomach where her son had once rested. Dios protégalo, she murmured. Protect him. I closed the steel box and snapped the lock shut. We leave in 10 minutes, I said. Everyone gathered their things, gear ropes, flashlights, files. But before we left, Maria stepped close and touched my sleeve gently. Why are you helping me? She whispered. You owe me nothing. I looked at her, the fear, the strength, the love burning through her grief, and felt something shift inside me. Because someone tried to take my life, I said quietly. Someone tried to take your child, and the same woman orchestrated both. I let out a steady breath, and because no mother should lose her child. Not like this. Maria's eyes glistened with gratitude. When she spoke, her voice was soft but unbreakable. Then let's end her. The wind howled again. The night darkened, and together we stepped into the storm. The Whitmore Reproductive Services building looked nothing like the nightmare it truly was. From the outside, it could have passed for a boutique wellness clinic, glass facade, soft white lighting, manicured hedges dripping with rainwater. But the moment we stepped into the shadows behind the loading bay, the truth seeped through the cracks like poison. Victor checked his watch. Shift change in 4 minutes. Once the guards rotate, we slip in through the lower utility door. Maria shivered beside Elena, her sweatshirt soaked through from the storm. But when she looked up at the building, the place her baby had been stolen, her fear turned to steel. "I remember that window," she whispered. "They put me in a room on the 3rd floor. They said I was hallucinating when I cried for him." Elena wrapped an arm around her. "Tonight you take back what they stole." Grant crouched near the maintenance hatch, tension sharpening every line of his face. We walk in silent. We walk out with the kill file, Rosen, and every document proving Trevino's crimes. And the moment we get the baby's transfer records, we move for the Hale house. And then I asked, quietly. Grant didn't look at me as he answered. Then Trevino's empire collapses. A low hum vibrated through the ground, the sound of Whitmore's backup generators. Victor dug his fingers into the metal seam of the vent panel. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "See," Maria whispered. Victor pried open the panel, and we slipped through the narrow opening, one at a time, moving into a dark utility corridor lit only by emergency bulbs. Pipes lined the ceiling like exposed ribs. The smell of antiseptic and bleach hung heavy in the air. Grant pointed left. "File servers are on sub-level 1. Rosen's office is on 2. "And the nursery?" Elena asked. A shadow crossed Grant's face. "They call it the transition wing. No cameras, no windows, and only Trevino's highest clearance staff have access." Maria caught my sleeve. "That's where they took my son," she whispered. "I heard him crying." Then the door closed. Victor swore under his breath. "We're getting him back." But first, Rosen. We split at the elevator shaft, Grant heading downward, Victor and I upward. Elena and Maria hid in a mop closet to avoid the rotating patrols. The climb up the emergency ladder felt endless. My arms burned by the time we reached the 2nd floor. Victor slid the panel aside, peered through the crack, then nodded. "Clear. Move." We entered a hallway that looked disturbingly ordinary, soft gray carpeting. Framed photos of smiling infants, the illusion of compassion hiding industrial cruelty. Rosen's office was at the end of the hall. A silver nameplate gleamed on the door. Dr. Liana Rosen, Chief of Perinatal Evaluation. Victor picked the lock in seconds. The door clicked open, and we froze. Rosen was inside. She sat at her desk behind stacks of files, hair tied in a tight bun, glasses perched on her nose. Pale, hollow-eyed, hands trembling. She wasn't alone. A man in a black coat stood behind her, one hand gripping her shoulder, the other holding a phone. The cleaner, the same one from the alley. He looked up stunned to see us, and then his mouth twisted. "You should have stayed dead," he snarled. The gun appeared so fast I barely registered it. But Victor did. He slammed into me, shoving me sideways, as the shot cracked through the room, shattering a glass cabinet. Papers exploded into the air. Rosen screamed, covering her head. The cleaner fired again. Victor flipped the metal desk over and dragged me behind it. "He's here for Rosen," I shouted. "She's a liability. Trevino is tying loose ends," Victor growled. "Not if we tie him first." The cleaner kicked the desk metal, screeching. He reached down, grabbing Victor by the collar, but Victor twisted, slammed an elbow into the man's ribs, and wrenched the gun free. They struggled, two silhouettes thrashing against spilled light and shadows. "Move!" Victor yelled. I lunged for Rosen. She was curled on the floor, sobbing. "Dr. Rosen," I said, urgently. "We're here to help you." "You can't help me," she cried. "She knows I kept copies I tried to run. She found me. Please, please don't let him kill me." Another gunshot blasted past us. The cleaner roared in pain. Victor struck him across the jaw with a metal file tray. The man crumpled unconscious, breathless. Victor wiped blood from his lip. "He'll wake up fast." "Grab Rosen, go." I hauled Rosen to her feet. Her entire body was shaking. Do you know where the newborn files are? I asked. She nodded rapidly. Sublevel 2, locked archive. Trevino keeps backups there. Digital and physical. Does it include the baby taken from Maria Campos? I asked. Her eyes widened. The one they renamed, yes. Yes, it should. She made me file it myself. Then you're coming with us, Victor said. You're our best chance at blowing this entire operation apart. I'll be killed if she finds out. She already sent a hitman after you. Victor snapped. Your chances are better with us. Rosen swallowed hard and nodded. We rushed into the hallway, only to freeze at the sound of heavy footsteps echoing toward us. Security. Victor muttered a curse. Back up. Fast. We sprinted toward the elevator shaft, but the door slid open, revealing Grant inside, panting heavily. I got the server dump, he said. But we've got a bigger problem. What? I demanded. Grant held up a tablet showing a blinking red alert. Security breach detected. North Star is locking down the building. Rosen paled. That means Trevino knows. Knows what Victor asked. Grant swallowed. That you're alive? My blood ran cold. She triggered the kill protocol, Grant said. She's coming here. Personally. Rosen staggered. We need to get to the nursery. Now, the baby, she'll remove him before you can recover him. Remove, Victor repeated. Rosen whispered, once a child is no longer useful, Trevino orders a compassionate termination. No records, no evidence. Maria's baby. Roberto, alive for now. We're going, I said. Take us to him. We sprinted down the stairwell, Rosen leading Grant behind us. As we ran, Rosen spoke rapidly between breaths. Trevino stores infants in temperature-controlled pods. Looks like NICU care. But it's a holding system for transfer or disposal. I pushed harder. When we reached the sublevel, 2 entrance, Rosen swiped her badge. The door clicked open, and we were hit with the sterile, icy blast of the transition wing. Rows of white cradles stood in perfect alignment beneath dim blue lights, each containing a sleeping newborn. Machines hummed. Monitors glowed. My heart twisted violently. This is a warehouse, Victor whispered. Not a nursery. Rosen pointed to a cradle near the end. There, that one. That's baby 47, Maria's son. He was tiny, dark-haired, swaddled tightly, peaceful, alive. I reached for him just as a voice rang out from behind us, smooth, icy, unmistakable. Well, well, Evelyn Trevino said. Isn't this a touching reunion? We turned. She stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed guards dressed in a tailored charcoal coat, hair flawless expression, bored. As I live and breathe, she said softly. Thomas Hale? Resurrected? Her eyes flicked to the baby. You're early, she murmured. I was going to remove that child tonight. A jolt of rage burst through me. You murder the elderly. You traffic infants. You destroy families. Her smile sharpened. I create efficiency. You're a monster. No, she said. I'm inevitable. Victor raised his gun. Grant did the same. Evelyn didn't flinch. You won't shoot, she said. Because if you do, the entire building seals, and all these infants suffocate when the oxygen shuts off. A cold, calculated threat. I felt the weight of the moment crush the air from my lungs. But then, a soft cry. Baby turned 47. Roberto woke, eyes blinking open. And for the first time in my life, I understood pure visceral purpose. I stepped forward. No more phases, I said. Your empire ends tonight. Evelyn's smile faded, and the standoff began. Evelyn's guards stepped forward with military precision. Guns raised, jaws clenched. The soft blue glow of the transition wing cast their faces in an eerie, sterile light. Behind them, the rows of white cradles hummed mechanically innocent lives suspended in a warehouse of cruelty. Maria's son whimpered again, the tiny sound slicing clean through the tension. Evelyn folded her hands calmly behind her back. "You're surrounded, Thomas. All exits are locked. Oxygen is regulated. Any wrong move from your side and this entire wing becomes a sealed tomb." Victor's grip tightened on his weapon. "She's bluffing." "No," Grant said under his breath. "She's not." Evelyn's eyes flashed with amusement. Listen to the former detective. He understands systems. And North Star is a system, one designed to eliminate inefficiency. "And who decides what's inefficient?" I demanded. Her voice chilled. "People like you. People who refuse to step aside when their usefulness ends." The baby fussed louder, and Maria took a trembling step toward him. Evelyn lifted a hand lazily, as a queen might shoo a peasant. "Move again," she said, "and I'll have my men shoot the doctor first." Rosen flinched violently. "Please, please don't silence," Evelyn said. "You're already dead. You should have burned your backups when I told you." Rosen sank to her knees, sobbing. She had seen what happened to those who crossed Evelyn. I had seen it too. But Evelyn had miscalculated one fatal thing. I was no longer afraid to lose everything. Because I already had. "You built an empire on murder," I said, voice low. "On stolen inheritances, on children treated like inventory. But tonight, everything ends." Evelyn tilted her head. Bold words for a walking corpse? Grant looked between us, calculating distances, angles, odds. He spotted something I hadn't. A red emergency lever mounted on the wall behind Evelyn. "Victor," Grant whispered. "Right wall." Victor glanced, barely nodding. We needed a distraction. We needed seconds. We needed something Evelyn wouldn't expect. So I chose the one thing she had never believed possible. I stepped forward and raised my empty hands. No weapons, no threats. Just one question, I said, locking eyes with her. "Why me? Why my family?" Her expression sharpened. For the first time, she looked almost intrigued. "Because your son invited me in," she said. "He wanted control. He wanted access. He wanted significance. I merely provided the pathway. You blame me when it was Lucas who offered you on a platter." Maria gasped softly. Elena's eyes filled with fury. Victor swore under his breath. Evelyn smiled. "You're angry? Good. Anger blinds smart men." "Not tonight," I said. And I hurled the steel box across the floor. It slammed into the cradles loud as a gunshot. Evelyn's guards flinched and turned instinctively. It was only a fraction of a second, but Victor used it. He lunged sideways, firing not at the guards, but at the emergency lever. Glass shattered. A siren wailed. Red lights erupted, and the oxygen system switched from automatic regulation to emergency ventilation override. Evelyn's eyes went wide. "No! Stop!" Grant tackled the nearest guard. Elena shoved Maria behind a metal column. Rosen scrambled toward the cradles, sobbing. I raced to the baby's pod, Roberto lifting him into my arms. His tiny fingers curled against my shirt, his cries muffled against my chest. Evelyn screamed, "Seal the wing now." Her guard scrambled, but the system wasn't on her side anymore. The emergency override had unlocked the secondary doors. Victor fired again, taking out a guard's leg. Another charged him, swinging wildly, but Grant intercepted with a brutal elbow strike. Evelyn backed toward the exit, eyes burning with hatred. "You think this ends with me?" she hissed. "North Star is bigger than one building. We are everywhere." She didn't finish. Because I took a step toward her with the baby in my arms, and she froze. "You don't get to touch another child," I said. "You don't get to choose who lives or dies. You don't get to rewrite anyone's life again." Her jaw tightened. "You're not in control, Thomas. Then run, I said. Show us who really survives without your empire to hide behind. For the first time, Evelyn hesitated. Then she spun and fled through the side corridor, slamming an emergency door behind her. Victor cursed. She's heading for the surface access. Let her go, Grant snapped. The cops will have her cornered once we release the evidence. What evidence? Victor demanded. Grant pointed at Rosen. Rosen stood trembling beside a locked steel cabinet. Here, she whispered. Everything. She made me hide everything here. She typed a code with shaking fingers. The door swung open. Inside were dozens, no hundreds of files, hard drives, signed affidavits, medical falsifications, bribery ledgers. The kill file. North Star's entire operation. I felt the air leave my lungs. Grant grabbed a folder and skimmed it. His eyes widened. This is it, he breathed. This will burn her entire syndicate down. Maria approached, hands trembling. My son. Will he have justice? I placed Roberto into her arms. Her face softened instantly, tears streaming as she kissed his forehead. Yes, I said. And so will every family she destroyed. Sirens wailed outside, dozens of them. Elena peered through a small window. Police, fire, ambulance. They're sealing the perimeter. Grant smiled grimly. We timed the distress call right. San Diego PD thinks there's a fire in the ventilation. They'll search everything. And when they find the kill file, Victor asked. North Star collapses, Grant said. Today, a thunderous crash echoed from above the sound of someone breaking through an upper door. Evelyn Victor growled. She's trying to escape. I exhaled slowly. Let her run, I said. Let her see what happens when her empire burns. We'll deal with her later. Maria held Roberto tightly, whispering prayers into his hair. Elena hugged them both. Rosen sagged against the cabinet, relief and terror mixing in her expression. Grant looked at me, voice steady. You did it, Hale. I shook my head. We're just getting started. Footsteps thundered down the hallway, police entering the building. Hands up, someone shouted. Nobody move, Bob. But for the first time since I'd been pushed into the Pacific Ocean, I wasn't the one running. I wasn't the one hunted. I wasn't the one drowning. Tonight, I had pulled someone else from the water. Tonight, I had taken one victory from Evelyn Trevino's hands. And tomorrow, I would finish what she started, but on my terms. The courthouse felt colder than the Pacific, colder than the night Evelyn tried to erase me, colder than the halls of Whitmore with their rows of silent cradles. It wasn't the marble floors or the fluorescent lights. It was the weight of it, the weight of truth finally dragged into daylight, the weight of justice coming due. The case had exploded across national news faster than any of us expected. The raid on Whitmore. The discovery of newborns stored like warehouse inventory. The kill file Grant recovered. The sworn testimony from Rosen. The death certificates with forged signatures. The guardianship scheme. The attempted murder on my yacht. The Hale estate crisis, they called it. But it wasn't just mine. It was Maria's. It belonged to every family Trevino had destroyed. When the judge took the bench, the crowd hushed. She was a stern woman in her 60s, hair silver and coiled at her neck. She had read every document, every affidavit, every file Rosen helped us unlock. Her eyes skimmed the courtroom and landed on me briefly. Mr. Hale, she said, you may proceed. I rose, my palms flat on the table in front of me. Your Honor, before I speak to the charges, I'd like to acknowledge the victims present today. I gestured to the side row, Maria holding Roberto Elena beside her, several elderly people rescued after the Whitmore raid. And those who aren't, I added quietly. The courtroom breathed as one. I was meant to be one of them, I said. My own son, guided by Evelyn Trevino, signed away my life with a forged medical declaration. They staged a decline, built a narrative, and pushed me into the ocean for $5 billion. A murmur rippled through the room. But I survived, I said. And what I learned in the days after my death was worse than anything I imagined. I described the system North Star Transition Group, the doctors, the lawyers, the cleaners, the traffic of infants used as legal pawns. I described how Trevino manipulated families, weaponized grief, preyed on ambition. When I finished, the judge nodded solemnly. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Then she turned her gaze toward the defendant's table. Evelyn Trevino sat between two federal agents, wrists cuffed. She wore an immaculate gray suit despite her arrest, but her hair was tangled, and her eyes, once so cold and calculating, were hollow. Weeks of interrogation had stripped her down to bone. Beside her, Lucas sat, rigid, pale hands trembling. He refused to look at me, not once. Madeline stared straight ahead, jaw-tight, hatred simmering like a dying flame. The judge read the charges slowly, methodically, like she wanted each syllable to stain the air. Conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, trafficking of minors, abuse of probate authority, criminal negligence resulting in death, attempted homicide. The list felt endless. Given the evidence, the judge concluded this court is prepared to deliver its sentence. Every heart in the courtroom seemed to stop beating at once. To Evelyn Trevino, the judge said, "You are sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. This sentence applies to each count of murder committed through orchestrated incidents of elder exploitation." Evelyn didn't blink. She simply stared forward as if her body had emptied itself of anything human. To Madeline Hale, the judge continued, "Your involvement, though secondary, was deliberate. You received 25 years. Madeline collapsed in her chair, sobbing. And to Lucas Hale, I held my breath. Given your voluntary cooperation during the investigation, your admission of guilt, and your expressed remorse, you are sentenced to 18 years. My chest tightened, not with anger, not with victory, with grief. The judge closed the files. Court adjourned. The gavel struck. The room erupted, reporters rushing out, families crying, attorneys scrambling for statements. But Lucas didn't move. He just sat there shaking until the officers approached. As they pulled him to his feet, he finally looked at me. For the first time since the night he tried to kill me, my son met my eyes. "Dad," he croaked. His voice broke like a child's. "I'm sorry." There were 1,000 things I could have said. A lifetime of hurt. A lifetime of love. A lifetime of memories twisted now into something sharp and fragile. But all I managed was a quiet, hollow truth. So am I, son. The officers led him away. That was the last time I saw him in the courtroom. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, weak but real. Reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Strangers shook my hand. Lawyers from elder rights groups thanked me. But I barely heard them. I was looking at Maria. She held Roberto as if she'd never let him go again. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but they weren't the desperate tears from before. They were full, alive. She stepped forward and hugged me without hesitation. "Gracias," she whispered, "for giving me back my life." I swallowed hard. "You saved yourself. I just helped you finish." Elena approached with Victor at her side. Victor clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You look like a man who needs sleep," he said. "I'll sleep when Trevino's whole network is burned to ash." "You already lit the match," Grant said behind him. "This is the biggest elder fraud takedown in U.S. history. More arrests are happening as we speak." I nodded. It wasn't closure, but it was justice. And justice was a beginning. Weeks later, the house that once held my betrayal was reclaimed, cleaned out, repainted, stripped of every lie Trevino had planted. I didn't move back in. Instead, I donated it to a nonprofit that housed elderly victims of financial abuse. It felt right. Maria received full custody of Roberto. She moved into a small home not far from Elena's apartment, where they visited often. We'd become an odd little constellation of survivors. One evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sun sink behind the cliffs. The ocean rolled quietly, its waves gentle, as if it apologized for the night it tried to swallow me. Roberto giggled in Maria's arms as they walked up the path. He reached for me with tiny fingers, and when I lifted him, he smiled without fear. That was when I finally felt it. Not victory, not vengeance. Something softer. A return. "Tom," Maria said gently. "You're trembling." "I'm all right," I said. "Just grateful." She smiled. "We all survived something terrible." "Yes," I agreed. "And we're all still here." The wind rolled across the water like a long sigh of relief. I had been a dead man. Now I was something else. Alive, needed, and finally free. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you'd like to share your thoughts, your favorite moment, or your own story, leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps bring more voices, more justice, and more stories to life.